Today, Group 4 will be covering a cybersecurity risk assessment of New Zealand. The topics to be covered for this presentation are authentication, authorization, access control, and risk management. Authentication is the process of determining whether someone or something actually is who or what it states himself to be. Authorization is the permission given to someone to have or to do something. We will touch on threats and vulnerabilities such as brute force, man-in-the-middle, and privilege escalation. Hardening steps will also be covered, such as hashing passwords, multi-factor authentication, and monitoring session lengths. Access control, which is a security method that can be used to regulate whom or what can view or use resources in a computing environment. Under access control, we will also be covering vulnerabilities such as inside threats, remote access trojans, and orphaned accounts. We will go over hardening steps such as automated account provisioning, routinely scanning for orphaned accounts, and role based on access control, to name a few. The last topic we will be reviewing is risk management, which is the process of identifying, accessing, and controlling threats to an organization. Authentication and authorization, threats and vulnerabilities. Brute force attacks are where a malicious actor is using a program to guess a password by trying thousands of different possible alphanumeric combinations until the password is correctly guessed. Man-in-the-middle attacks are where a malicious actor gets in between a wireless user and an access point, sniffing all of that user's traffic. Cross-site scripting, or XSS, comes in two forms, stored and reflected. Stored attacks are where a permanent code is embedded on a target server, and reflected XSS is where codes such as error messages or event IDs are sent to a target server with hopes of getting the server to perform a desired function or release desired information. SQL injection, or SQLI, is where data is injected into the data backend of a web server with hopes of the server will divulge information about itself or grant access. Privilege escalation and directory traversal are where a user, once compromised a system, tries to escalate their abilities to access different network resources by pivoting through different systems. Authentication and authorization, hardening methods. Hashing passwords takes the password a user enters, then converts characters into numbers, and then multiplies the number by a large prime number. When you enter this password to log in, it matches the password to the hash. Third-party trusted ID providers in authorization management, such as Google Authentication, OneLogin, and Tivoli, provide a cloud-based unified access manager that makes it easier for companies to manage and secure access to applications. Multi-factor authentication benefits have improved security by adding protection in layers, such as having something a user knows, like a password or a PIN, something a user can possess, like a smart card or mobile phone, or something that is the user, such as a fingerprint. Case sensitivity can drastically improve password complexity by making it harder to guess and use against brute force attacks. Access control lists can be used for authentication by describing what access rights a user will have access to. For example, a user having read versus write access. Session length monitoring can enhance security by having a session of activity time out after a given length of time. This will enhance the security by reducing the risk of having the wrong person gain access to a different user's information or data. Access control vulnerabilities. Insider threats is the #1 cause of major breaches within an organization by coming from people inside the organization. Remote control access trojans are often downloaded without knowledge when another piece of software is downloaded and installed. Once it is installed, it manages its own level of control and can spread to several other devices on the network. Orphaned accounts pose a very big security risk. Hackers like orphaned accounts because they are not often monitored and they can be used to gain unauthorized access to resources and sensitive information. Hardening for access control. User account provisioning is a business process for creating and managing access to resources in an information technology system. To be effective, an account provisioning process should ensure that the creation of accounts and access to the software and data is consistent and simple to administer. Least privilege doctrine ensures that users have access only to the resources they need on a network and nothing more. For example, only a network printer in their workspace, not every printer on the network. Scanning for orphan accounts limits the possibility one will be hijacked. User behavior analytics is the use on complex algorithms to monitor not normal behavior by users on a network based on job roles, to determine if any users are engaging in activity that could be interpreted as potential malicious insider activity. Remote access is often used by teleworkers and without proper security control in place, such as tokens, can be hijacked by malicious actors. Role-based access control is similar to least privilege doctrine in that users are assigned access based on job roles in Active Directory groups, which makes for easy management and security monitoring. Vulnerability and risk management. A buffer overflow occurs when an application attempts to write data past the end, or occasionally past the beginning, of a buffer. Buffer overflows can cause applications to crash, compromise data, and can provide an attack vector for further privilege escalation to compromise the system on which the application is running. A race condition is an undesirable situation that occurs when a device or system attempts to perform two or more operations at the same time, but because of the nature of the device or system, the operation must be done in proper sequence to be done correctly. Access control is a selective restriction of access made up by two main components, authentication and authorization. OS command injection attack is when an attacker attempts to execute system-level commands to a vulnerable web application. Applications are considered vulnerable to the OS command injections if they can be manipulated into executing unauthorized system commands via web interface. An injection attack wherein an attacker can execute malicious SQL statements that control a web application's database server. Cross-site scripting is where an actor tricks a web browser into executing an unwanted action in an application which a user is logged in. Broken or risky cryptographic algorithm is an unnecessary risk that may result in the exposure of sensitive information. Weak passwords fall very quickly to brute force attack.